All right, there's a question about sine, cosine functions. It says, writes two equations that represent each given graph. One equation must be sine and one cosine. So remember the parent function. I'm just going to put them both at once. Y equals A sine or cosine, B, hold on, let me get a different pen here, X minus C plus D. And now for the parent function, remember the parent function for sine or cosine go from plus 1 to minus 1. So the amplitude of that is 2. From 1 to minus 1 is 2. So the parent amplitude is 2. And how do I calculate A? I'm going to do 2A equals the amplitude. Well, the amplitude of this one is from minus 4 to 2, which it goes up 6. And then it goes back down 6. So the amplitude is 6. So that equals 6. And then A equals 3. To calculate the B, I know that the B equals 2 pi, which is the normal period for sine and cosine, the period of the parent functions, divided by the period. So in this case, what is the period? It goes from its peak to the next time it hits its peak is at pi. So it's 2 pi over pi. 2 pi over the period. So B in this case equals 2. How do I calculate C? Well, I have to look at the parent function for sine and cosine. Let me look at cosine. Notice how it's at its peak at 0. It's down to its lowest point at pi, and then peak again at 2 pi. So peak, lowest point, peak. Here's peak, lowest point, peak. It starts at 0 and then down at pi over 2 and up at pi. So there's this, there's a compression which I got with B, but there is no shift. This thing doesn't shift. C is the shift left or right. If C is greater than 0, then the shift is to the right. If it's less than 0, the shift is to the left. Now, when it's greater than 0, this is going to be minus a number. When it's less than 0, it's going to be plus a number. Because if C is negative, minus negative 3, say, is plus 3. So the sign is opposite of what C is. But anyway, for cosine, there is no shift. And then, what is the D? D is the midline. Usually the midline for the parent function is 0. In this case, I look at the top and bottom. I'm at 2 minus 4. So that's an amplitude of 6. Half of 6 is 3. So I go 3 from the top or bottom. And if you can see on this graph, every 2 squares is 1. This is 2. Go down 2 squares, that's 1. Down 2 squares is 0. So I have to go down 3. 1, 2, 3. There's the midline, which instead of being at 0 is at negative 1. So D equals negative 1. So now I'll have to shift the sign. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But for cosine, it's going to be A, which is 3. Cosine, I found the B, which is 2. X, there is no C, so C is 0, minus 0. Plus D, D is minus 1. So it's plus minus 1 is minus 1. That's the cosine function. What about the sine function? Let me look at the parent sine function. Notice how the parent sine function has its peak at pi over 2, whereas this one has its peak at 0. So I need to shift this pi over 2 to the left. So C is minus pi over 2. So this is minus C, but I'll just put for the sine function on this one, C is minus pi over 2. So minus negative pi over 2 is going to be plus pi over 2. Everything else will be the same. So this is the cosine. Here's the sine one. It's going to be 3 sine. B is still 2, 2x. And now it's going to be minus negative pi over 2, so plus pi over 2. And then minus 1, because the midline moved down to minus 1. So there's the cosine graph, or cosine function, and there's a sine function. And I'll go to Desmos and show those. 3 cosine 2x minus 1, and 3 sine 2x plus pi over 2 minus 1. And notice they are the same function. When I turn on the sine one, it's right over the cosine one. And it's at its highest point at 2. It's then at its lowest point at pi over 2, back to its highest point at pi, again to its highest point at 2 pi, just like this graph. It's at its highest point at 0, then highest point at pi, then highest point at 2 pi. So these are indeed the correct graphs for this situation.